last week. I wanted to spend quite a bit of time on the review of the assignments that we did, because from my experience, if we don't get managing time right, then almost everything else that we do or we plan for will not happen. Because remember, in the past sessions that I have said it is important to plan and to make a decision to do things, but the most important thing is actually to do things. Action is the most important thing. But many times we find that we are not acting, we're not doing things because we don't have time. So the important thing is how we manage this time. And remember, once again, we talked about the time currency. Whether you know how to manage time or not, you're given the same amount of time as everybody at midnight every day. And over the next 24 hours, that time keeps on depreciating. And at the end of 24 hours, you're back to zero, waiting for a new chunk of 24. There is no sharing, there is no pausing, there's nothing else, but you can invest it. And the way you invest your time or not invest your time today determines how much the sense of time you're going to feel in future, whether you feel like you have enough time or feel like you don't have enough time. So I'll start with this. This was homework that I gave 2 weeks ago, and I reminded you about this homework last week. And I really want to encourage you to please read the temperament book. Has any of you read it? Can I just see by a show of hands or people saying yes, if you read this book before, whether within the context of this program or before that? Show of hands, or by some just unmuting yourself and saying A. I see one person, Brenda. The others? Have you even tried to look for the book? Let's start from there. So I really encourage you to find this book. And the reason I'm encouraging you to do this is because we talked about our strengths and our weaknesses. And one of the ways that you can understand the strengths and weaknesses you have is if you understand the temperament that you are, who you are, what your makeup is like, how you react to certain things and how you don't react to certain things, why you feel the way you do about certain things and things like that. So I found this book to be an excellent resource. It has guided me a lot. It's guided a number of people I've talked to before. And I really encourage you to find a copy of this book and to read it. There's someone speaking in the chat. Someone saying they are trying to look for a free online copy. I tried to look for one to share with you, but there's no free online copy. I believe it's so much in demand that there are no free online copies. I actually did try to look for it because I wanted to share it with all of you, but it is not there. So please go to a bookshop. Sometimes even the sellers by the roadside may have them, but I know that in the bookstores you will definitely find it. People who are young people here who still live with their parents, I ask you to take advantage of your parents. Your parents, like we said, are your super tools. These are your opportunities. Leverage on their ability to afford a book and say, you know, mommy, daddy, I need this book. Please buy it for me. Those who have phones say, if you don't buy me airtime this week, it is okay, but I really need you to get me a copy of this book. It is a life-changing book. I don't get any benefits by promoting it, but I know it has helped me a lot. So I encourage you to get this book. Okay. This slide, I will keep showing it over and over again, because I know a lot of us in our growing up had not met this concept before. And even for those who have met it, you did not go through sessions where you were helped to make it a habit. You were not helped to make it a habit. And so I really want us to always think about the way we react in terms of our stimulus and the stimulus that comes into our lives and the way we respond to it. Every day in the reactions that you have, ask yourself, was I proactive or was I reactive? And I want you to check on yourself every day. Am I improving? So a new assignment was thrown on your desk when you're already very busy. How did you react to that? Was I reactive? Was I proactive? Those with children, the children are doing very annoying things. I know some of the times they can get annoying, reporting, and you ask yourself, am I shouting back at them or am I taking time to have the freedom to choose. Am I giving space between the stimulus and my response? In other words, am I proactive? Am I reactive? Once again, remember that because you're human, there are some gifts that you have. In our lives, generally, there are no places where we have been trained to build them. But in this program, one of the things that we do over and over is developing a sense of self-awareness. Know who you are. Who am I by nature? What is my personality type? What are the things that I'm doing right? What am I not doing right? What are my priorities? In other words, we need to become self-aware. And then, am I using my imagination to respond to the stimulus? Someone, I think 2 weeks ago, talked about having a dream for 10 or 15 years from now. But the problem was her husband wasn't interested in that dream. He had other things that he thought were more important for the family. And so the question was, keep that imagination of where you want to be 10 years from now. And even if at the moment you cannot delve into it completely, is there anything that you are doing to get to that place that you want to be 10 years from now? Our conscience to have something that gives you a moral compass. Many of us in this meeting, I see the names Brenda, Irene, Emma, Moses, those are Christian names. But even in other faiths like Islam, there is talk about a moral compass. What is your moral compass? Are you reacting based on what your moral compass is, or are you reacting based on what everybody out there is saying and everyone out there is doing? Then finally, remember, we have an independent will. The excuse of my boss has insisted that I should do this, or I reacted this way because so-and-so was very annoying. Those are very reactive terms. We have independent will, and we need to choose to do whatever it is that we do. We need to choose our responses because we are not animals, we are human beings. So please, let's continue with this homework. Check your reactivity versus your proactivity, and check how you are improving over time. This is the same thing that I've just been talking about. Look at how often you're using reactive language. There's nothing I can do about this. I'm stuck here. There's nothing I can do. I have tried, and that is it. You know, my relationship with my mom or my dad is very poor, or with my husband is poor, or with my parents is poor. I have done all I can. There's nothing left that I can do. There's always something you can do. As a proactive person, always say, fine, I have tried this. It hasn't worked. What are my alternatives? I have tried to do math, got coaching, but I'm still failing in math. That has failed. What are the other alternatives that I have? We need to move from being reactive to proactive. This is just the way I am. We go back to temperaments. Do you know your temperament? There are things that you are because you are created that way. What are you going to do to either overcome them or to minimize its impact or influence on your life? And then we've talked about reacting to people, making people determine what our moods are. You're moody, you're not talking to anyone, shouting at other people because of something that someone has done. And this person has moved on with their life. They have forgotten even what they've done. And you're here tying a samosa for a week. And some people it's for years. I was going through a coaching session with someone, and this person was really unhappy with the relationship she had with one of her parents. And she said, you know, this is my parent. She should understand that I am annoyed and the like, because she had heard that her parent had said something about her to someone. So I asked her, have you talked to your parent about that? She said, I cannot. I haven't talked to her about it. I'm so mad. And this has been 2 years now. And I said, how sure are you that the person in the middle translated whatever message they were given correctly? Maybe they were actually not given that message at all. So for over a year, someone is really upset with someone who doesn't even realize that they're upset. And so we need to remember we can control our own feelings. So we have gone through this before, but please keep checking. Am I reactive? What language am I using? And those of us who are parents and those of us who are supervisors at work, what language are we using with our children, with our parents? I mean, with our the people we supervise. Are we using reactive language with them? We also need to help them to become more proactive. Okay, so let's go on to the issue of time. We talked about the currency of time. I'm not going to stop talking about time currency. I want us every day to wake up in the morning and remember that by the time you get up in the morning, if you get up at 6 o'clock, 6 units of your time have already gone. You have finished 6 hours. You are left with, those who did math, what is 24 take away 6? I'm waiting for 18. So you're left with only 18 hours of your time currency by the time you get up in the morning, if you wake up at 6. But there are people who are waking up at 12 and they're given the excuse of COVID. So by the time you get up in the morning, you have finished 12 of your 24 hours. Those who did math, what percent is that?
50%.
20%? You finished 12 out of 24 hours.
50.
50%. And those who are in P1, remember, 50% is a half. So half of your time currency is gone. Can you imagine if at midnight someone gave you 24 million shillings and by the time you woke up in the morning, you find 12 gone. You don't know where it has gone. You can't get it back, but it is gone. How would you feel? Or I know for a lot of us, 24 million is a lot of money. We don't know how to count even to a million. Let's bring it down to 24,000 shillings. Or
Yes.
we bring it down to 24,000 shillings. If I give you I tell you every night I'm going to be giving you 24,000 shillings at midnight, and I will take away the balance at the end of the day. So 24 hours later, I will take away the balance. What would you do? I want to hear answers. So every night you are assured of getting 24,000 shillings. Please unmute yourselves and give me an answer. What would you do? You come and say.
Sorry, what was the question?
The question someone wants to answer is here. My question is, imagine if every night, if I tell you, and it is a promise that every day at midnight, I will give you, let's say 240,000 shillings. But at the end of 24 hours, I will take that money away from you. What would you do?
I would use that day to spend all the money you gave me.
So you say you would spend all, so Moses says you'll spend all the money I gave him. Please, what are you going to say? They want to hear you.
I think what I would do is I just try to get some work done in a day where I can get paid so that when they take the money away, at least I still have something.
Okay, thank you. Go and have a nice day. When he heard us talking about money, he couldn't resist coming to share his opinion. So he says he would use the money wisely so that at the end of the day, when the remainder is taken, he has some that is left over. Anyone else wants to share what they would do? Okay, since no one is sharing, I think that is a really important point, and it comes back to what I was saying earlier on. We need the way you use your time currency today determines the sense of how much or how little time you will have in future. If you've used it up wisely today, you've really invested it. So in future, even when you're getting the same 24 hours, it feels like you have much more because you already invested the time that you had in the days that were past. So let's remember the time currency, and time currency is, if you remember it that way, it is very easy to manage your time. So last week we talked about this and I gave you homework. Remember the homework? I gave you homework to look at the 4 quadrants of time management. Once again, these quadrants came up from what is called the Eisenhower principle, where it says things that are very important are seldom urgent, and things that are urgent are seldom important. What has your experience been this week when you looked at your quadrants? Let me just go straight to, okay, let's first review it. We said in quadrant 1, the things are important and urgent. So in other words, you cannot move on without addressing them. If there is a big pipe burst in your house, you need to deal with it immediately. But if it was just leaking, then it is important. You're like, oh, it's important, I'll put a bucket here and I'll deal with it later. That's what most of us do. It's important that the pipe is leaking, but it's not urgent because it hasn't exploded. So you put a bucket and you say, I'll deal with it later. And many times, guess what? We deal with it when it has exploded, and yet we saw it leaking earlier on. So we allowed something that we knew was in quadrant 2 to move to quadrant 1. So while things in quadrant 1 are urgent, and need to be dealt with immediately. I'm hoping that in the homework that I gave you, you were able to identify those things that you allowed to move from quadrant 2 into quadrant 1. In other words, because you did not spend time prioritizing on those items in the past, now they have become urgencies. Because you haven't been eating well in the past, now you have to deal with diabetes. Because you didn't build a relationship with your parent, now they are, for those of us who are older, now your parents are in their 60s and 70s, and you're trying to work so hard to build up that relationship because time is running out. So we need to look and see what are those things that we have made urgent. Students who are candidates this year, you knew for the last 4 years, those in S4 and those in S6, you knew since you joined S5 that there were going to be final exams. But somehow, for some reason, because it wasn't urgent then, the things were kept, and now you realize in third term of S4, of S6, that you have to read things from S1 or things from S5. So I hope you were able to find those things that because of what you were doing in the past, you allowed unconsciously to move from quadrant 2 to quadrant 1. Then we said quadrant 3 were things that are urgent but not important. And we said these were things like interruptions, emails, popular activities, you know, things that are, some of things that are maybe a little bit pressing, like your phone is ringing. So we say those are urgent, but they are not important. We need to minimize and eliminate them. Then we talked about quadrant 4, which is full of time wasters. And I hope that you were able to identify which ones are key in your life. And we're going to look at that. We're going to review the homework. And finally, back again to quadrant 2, which is urgent, but not important. Those things which you, when you think about it, it's chill, spending time with family. Really, when you look at your wheel of life that we worked on about a month ago, you notice that everything on there is actually not urgent. And the reason for that is that these are things that are really important in our lives, but if you don't address them now, it looks like there's nothing wrong. But in future, when the time comes, then they're going to become urgent. We need to focus our attention on quadrant 2 and make sure that we give them attention, because all our life's priorities, all of them, by the way, fall in quadrant 2. Every single priority in your life. If you find that a priority is right now in quadrant 1, it is not because it belonged there in the past. It is because your actions in the past, the usage of your time currency has allowed it to progress from quadrant 2 into quadrant 1. So once again, take the time, look at your wheel of life and ask yourself, are all these items still in quadrant 2? Because that is where they need to be. If they're not in quadrant 1, then you need, in quadrant 2, and have moved to quadrant 1, then you need to work on those bits with urgency and build up your pizza to where it should be. If you have any questions, please interrupt me and mute yourself and ask, or if you have any experiences you want to share, you're also very welcome to unmute and to share your experience. So let's go to the homework. Can someone share what they found? What was your experience doing this homework? How do I spend my time? Anyone wants to share? Emma? Please unmute yourself and share your
I'll go
experience.
after someone. Maybe I can go second.
Emma wants to go second. Holger, do you want to go first?
Hello.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Last week I didn't attend, and I didn't get time to go through what you guys went through.
Okay. Did you get the homework? Did you get it on your email?
No, I didn't get it.
Interesting. That means you're not on the mailing list. Can you send me an email immediately after this?
All
You
right.
have a paper and pen? I can give you the email address. Do you have it?
No, I think I'll send you my email afterward. I don't have a paper.
Okay, please send your email address so that we can send you last week's session as well as the assignments. Irene, do you want to share with us your experience discovering where your time is going? Where
Yes.
you? Yes, welcome, Irene. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I spend most of my time in quadrant 4.
Mhm.
The distractions, that was about 6 hours. WhatsApp, social media, everything, TV. So yes, and then I spend about 3 hours in quadrant 2, planning,
Uh-huh.
developing myself and all that, and the same amount of time in quadrant 1.
Mhm.
Yes, and then for interruptions, around 1 hour.
Okay.
Yes, the rest of the time is sleeping and meals and yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much for sharing with us, Irene. Emma, we're back to you now. You asked to be number 2.
I pray my interruptions will let me be. Currently, working from home. I tend to be a lot in quadrant 3.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
There are lots of interruptions. Of course, the children, like you said, this, that, mommy, this. Even right now, you're always being pulled in every direction.
Okay. Mhm.
Then at work, the ad hoc requests, I guess, have also increased. And though I find it wrong, but I don't even know how we can address it. I'm still trying to find a proactive way to deal with it.
Mhm.
But we've had such a situation where, given the head of department has told us we have to be more agile and get used to the ad hoc requests that will be coming in.
Mhm.
So this means you get a brief like at 11 or 8 about something that's needed by morning.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
you find that you have to work through the night. And it seems like most of also the other team members are accepting it for now. But it's actually not, they're not happy. Of course, no one is happy about that.
Right, right. Mhm.
Um, Time wasters. I think for me, I'm mostly in 1 and 2. Okay, 1 and 4.
Mhm.
At +9 there. I don't know what happened to my phone this week. But my phone app died on me for 2 days. So that's the Stay Focused app.
Mhm.
So I suddenly realized my WhatsApp was on during the morning now. So you can only imagine what was happening. So before even the things that I would put off, I don't need to contact this person now,
Mhm.
I was back to that now, just randomly checking. Because I found that before I use the app, even when you have no reason, you just want to reach and see, is there a message?
Exactly.
Is there, I could have missed something. You're just lying to yourself. Hey, I could have missed something.
Yeah. Mhm.
Um, but in also quadrant 2, I've been just I think this period of also working from home, fine for me, I really struggled with it because I kept saying, at first of all, I won't be able to concentrate, do my work. I put in more work when I'm in office than here, but of course, you see the cases rising. And I was looking and saying, you know what, Emma, what is this time giving you an opportunity to work on, even areas in your wheel of life? What are those things that you can work on? Saving time with the children. So things like, because normally, even when I go to office, going through the jam, then coming through the jam is a lot. By the time you get here, it's late. It's, the evening activity, you pray and they're off to bed. So you don't get to spend time. But now even for my toddler, intentionally get to sit. Are we reading? Are we doing something? So I've been trying to be more purposeful in that area.
Thank you very much, Emma. So there are just a few things that I want to bring up here. So one of them comes from Holger's response. So Holger told us that she found she's spending excessive time on her phone, also on TV. And one thing I want to encourage us to do is to actually be able to find out how much time are we spending. And I know that my experience, and I believe for a lot of you, when I began to track my phone usage, in the beginning, I thought, I don't think I spent much time on my phone. I'm spending really little time on my phone. But as soon as I began tracking, I was shocked at how much time I was spending there. So even things like watching TV, if you're sitting down and watching 4 episodes of series, how much time is each of those episodes? And add them up. We need to actually quantify the amount of time we are spending doing each of these activities. And then it is very eye-opening, because all the time that you are quantifying is measured against 24 hours. So already by morning, we have already taken a chunk off because of sleep. And so then the percentage that is left for us to use is small. So everything that you do, you need to weigh it against the time currency that you're receiving on a daily basis. Quantification is really important. Emma has shared with us something that all of us experience, because we are all in a way working under somebody. If you're a student, you are working under your teachers or and under your parents or guardians. Those of us who are older, we are working under we have bosses at work and demands in the workplace. When we are going through demands like Emma has shared, the boss is calling you up at 8 and saying by 11 we need something ready, and they are piling this on you in addition to your daily workload at work. We need to go back to the circles. Remember the circles we talked about? A circle of control, the circle of influence, and then the circle of concern. And ask yourself, where does this request fall in those circles? It may be out of your control because you're not the one giving yourself this work, but you need to ask yourself, is there anything I could have done in the past to prevent this from happening? Could I have foreseen that this kind of assignment would come and therefore started working on it in the past? In other words, was it a quadrant 2 thing that I could have contributed to keeping in quadrant 2? Or is it something that I had no control over? We need to be able to do, it goes back to what we call the root cause analysis. If you realize that it's not in your quadrant or circle of control, look at the circle of influence. Do I have any influence in changing the status quo? Can I speak up during a team meeting? Can I send a polite email mentioning that we have other things we're working on? These are our priorities. Where should we put this as far as the priority is concerned? What happens is that sometimes our bosses and our teachers at work, because of their poor planning, end up making their poor planning our priorities. So sometimes if we candidly and carefully address it, we actually may be able to influence the way that they are, the requests that they're making out of us. For instance, if you mention that sending us work at the last minute may actually affect the quality of work that we do, we would do a better job if we got notice of this in advance, so that we can research and give better quality work. That may be able to make a difference. And so we need to think about this. Can I influence it in any way? And if you decide that it's something that you have absolutely no influence over, by the way, when you're deciding whether you can influence something or control something, go back and ask yourself, am I using reactive language or am I using proactive language? Sometimes we decide that things are in our circle of concern simply because we are not willing to be proactive. So you need to ask yourself, is this thing out of my control or out of my influence because I'm being reactive? Or in spite of all my proactivity measures, I know very well that this is outside my area of control and my area of influence. My area of, control and influence, and it's in the area of concern. If it's in your area of concern, unfortunately, you will have to address it, and you will have nothing to do. It becomes an urgent a crisis or interruption that you have to deal with. But if you can make any difference, then you should. Once again, go and you take yourself back to the circles, ask yourself whether you're being proactive or reactive, do a root cause analysis and see how you can either control or influence it. The other thing that I'm reminded of is the danger of procrastination. When we think we have a lot of time, and that is why many times we don't focus on items that are in quadrant 2. when we have a lot of time, the brain is tricky. It begins to tell us, you know, you can do it tomorrow. You can do it tomorrow. And so, for instance, students, we have been home for a whole year this year. But I promise you, if I was to give you an exam on the things you studied last year, the people would fail simply because we think we have so much time and so we can be laid back, we will read in future. And yet we know very well that COVID is not going to be here forever. We are going to go back to school and we are going to have to do assessments. But the danger of time is that we end up pushing things in quadrant 2 even further and further out and spending a lot of time in quadrant 4. So that is the paradox. A sense of increased time many times leads us to wasting it. We feel like, oh, well, I can do this later. Let me focus on these other things that are trivial, that are distractions. So that is really something important that we should remember. Okay, anyone else wants to share their experience with the quadrant? How we manage our time? Moses? What was your experience? Yes, share with us.
I realized I spend most of my time in quadrant 1 and quadrant 4. I'm currently taking my internship, and I have an online course I'm taking as well. So that course ends on November. By the end of November, my subscription will be expiring. So I spend most of my time. This I placed in quadrant 1, plus the internship thing still in quadrant 1. And then I realized that distractions. I spend a lot of time on Facebook, WhatsApp, and then checking out random stuff on the internet. And with quadrant 3, I don't seem to go through a lot of disruptions or interruptions. So I spend around 1 hour on that on average. And then we have non-urgents. I had to include all the things which were on my circle of life. I place them in quadrant 2.
And how much time are you spending there?
Around 3 hours.
Okay.
Yeah, on average, or less.
Okay.
Yeah. That's
okay.
It.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Moses. Something that has jumped out at me. You mentioned that you are doing an internship and you are doing a course, right?
Yes.
Yes. So where do you think those where do you think those ideally should fall in these 4 quadrants?
I thought quadrant 1 because the time is limited. I don't have all the time to continue doing this.
Okay. What do the others think? What do the others think? So he's doing a course.
Hello?
And he's doing an internship.
Hello?
Yes, hello, I hear you.
For me, I think it falls in 2.
Okay. Holger thinks it falls in 2. Anyone else?
I also think it falls in quadrant 2.
Paula thinks it falls in 2. Okay. Yes, Paula, you're saying because?
Because initially you have all the time to do the work before the deadline, which is in November. So unless he puts off doing the work and it piles up and he runs out of time and we are almost into November, then that's when it would go into quadrant 1.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wants to tell us what they think? Which quadrant does the course and internship fall, in your opinion? Brenda, what do you think?
I think they fall in quadrant 2 because they are related to self-development. And like the previous speaker says, unless he does not do the work and then it piles up, then that would move them to quadrant 1.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so you guys are right. So Moses, the internship.
I wanted to
yes, please go on. Okay, go on, please.
About the internship. So this is an online internship, and usually they set hours on which we have to be online. So this thing is urgent. I can't suspend it to evening when it has been scheduled in the morning.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what I think about the internship. Maybe the online course. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. I also noticed that when you were mentioning, you talked about time spent in quadrant 4 as well. Moses, how does this relate to your internship?
Time spent in quadrant 4.
Mm-hmm. The time you spent
I'm an IT student. Yeah, I'm an IT student. So I'm forced to be working with gadgets all the time. So, what causes the interruption? The interruption is that sometimes you are focused on productive work, and then you are forced to check out an email or a WhatsApp message or anything else or you go online to do research, and then you find yourself checking out a video on something totally unrelated.
Okay, thank you. I want us to reflect on what the terms Moses has used and tell us what did you hear, people who are listening. So Moses, we are not trying to pull you down. This is a learning process, and I encourage everyone who is attending to speak out, because when you speak out, we help identify certain things. So Moses used 2 terms in his last statement. Did anyone hear them in terms of proactivity? And yes, who heard it? Can you tell us what you heard?
I did. He said sometimes you're forced to.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so Moses said sometimes you're forced to check internet or you find yourself surfing the internet, or you're forced to check email. If I may ask you a question, does anyone put a gun to your head and say, check the email? Moses?
Okay.
So I'm not criticizing you, I'm just helping us. Moses, I'm not criticizing you, I'm helping us.
Yes, I understand.
Okay.
I understand.
Yes.
Yeah, so I was like, you go to do research about something, maybe you want to check out an academic paper.
Yeah.
So during the process, you find yourself clicking on another link, taking you to something totally unrelated, and then your brain is totally changed. You focus on that thing, you realize you have wasted like 30 minutes, then you have to come back.
Right. So you find, like so you find yourself. Are we here in the reactive language now? So each of us, as we talk to ourselves or we decide to do things, let's listen to ourselves. What term have I used? Because you find yourself, I just found myself there. That is reactive language. Or I was forced to check the email. That is reactive language. Unless, let's say your boss called you and said, Emma, you need to check this email. Otherwise, you'll be in trouble. Then you've actually been forced to check it. But otherwise, so we need to look at the reactive terms that we use, because because we have been engineered to use reactive terms. Even when we are not speaking out, we speak in our minds, by the way. Even when we are speaking to ourselves, we're using these reactive terms, and therefore it gives us an excuse to focus on things that we shouldn't be focusing on, and to have a quote unquote a genuine excuse for having spent time there. So Moses, the work that you're doing, your internship and your course are actually quadrant 2 items. You'll notice that if you focus on that morning internship work without doing anything else, you're there 100%. It will stop being a crisis. You'll realize that you can do it in a chill setting. So how can you tell that something is a crisis? If you feel a sense of urgency, I need to get this done, I really need to get this done. If I don't get it done, then this will happen. Right now, it has to be done right now. Then you know that you're in crisis mode. But if you can do it with peace, we've been given only 4 hours to finish this work, and I know in 4 hours I will be done. Then you're actually not in crisis mode. Does that make sense? So just because something needs to be done within a day doesn't mean it is a crisis. There are things that you can, that are quadrant 2 items that have a time boundary given to it. Actually, everything in life has a time boundary. But if you don't feel pressured when you are actually doing it, there is no real pressure, then it will still comfortably in quadrant 2. And so for the course that has a deadline in November, we're going to look at phone tracking next. If you notice, if you look at the hours that you're spending on your phone, if you get out of those hours, you'll notice that November is really far away. You may be through with this course by the end of October, if you actually looked at how you're spending time in quadrant 4. Moses, thank you very much for sharing. Anyone else wants to share the experience?
Yeah, I can.
Yes, who is
I'd like
that?
to. Yeah.
Okay, definitely.
Hola.
Yes, go ahead.
So,
Go ahead, please.
I started by subtracting the number of hours I spend on sleep. So these calculations were on the time when I'm awake. So I found that I spend 67% of my time in quadrant 2, and then 20% in quadrant 4, and 13% in quadrant 3. And okay, I think this is only as far since July started, because before July, I'm currently doing an internship. So that has helped me put most of my time into quadrant 2, because I'm trying to do the work before deadlines come and I have no time. But before that, I would say I used to spend my time in quadrant 4. But also the stay focused app, okay, the time management, the whole time management agenda helped me to put more of my time into quadrant 2, because I find that now I spend less time on social media, on social media, because that was my biggest distraction. And yeah.
Okay, thank you, Paula.
So that's what I found.
Thank you, Paula. Two things jump out from your discussion. One of the things that you have said, and everyone else has really been saying, is that we are becoming self-aware. Remember the proactive diagram. You have a stimulus, you have the reaction, and there's that precious time, golden time in the middle, what you do in that space. And we are becoming self-aware. You talked about the time management agenda. I like the use of that term. It's helped us to quantify how we're spending our time, and so we are aware. So the self-awareness, and it helps us to make the changes that need to be made or to continue in the track that we need to continue. It's amazing that you're spending 67% of your time in quadrant 2, but I'm going to put a but to that. When you look at your wheel of life, because everything on your wheel of life is in quadrant 2, I want you to ask yourself, Paula, how much time am I spending in all the areas of that wheel? Because remember, if you have a circle, you have a circle that has one part jutting out and the rest are tiny, or a wheel, it will not move, the car will not move. So the aim is to, well, it's good to spend most of our time in quadrant 2. The time in quadrant 2 should be divided among all the areas that are in our quadrant 2, are areas of priority. So excellent work, Paula. I'm going to ask you this week to look at the 67% time that you're spending in quadrant 2 and find out how you can evenly distribute it, or to some, may not be even, but give some time to each of the items that are supposed to be or that are in your quadrant 2. Thank you, those who have shared. Let's move on to the next one. We've talked about this, so I'll move to this. Let's go to cell phones, those who have cell phones. Over the 1 month, I've been asking you to do a weekly cell phone tracking. And this was, a daily cell phone tracking. And this was intentional. I knew that if I asked you to do the cumulative in the beginning, people would run away from here. But now that you've done your daily cell phone tracking, I asked you last week, can you now look at it cumulatively? And the tool, that the CARE360 tool for monthly tracking, has 2 parts. The first part is what we call the reality checker. You look at every week how much time you spent on the phone and break it down by app, how much time you spent on each app. It helps to tell whether if you spend 35 hours, for instance, a week on your app, it helps when you break it down to the different activities. Then you can see how much time you spent on beneficial activities. Moses told us he's an IT person. So he may end up spending in a week 40 hours or even more on his phone. But the point is, the time he spent on his phone, how much of it was spent actually doing his IT related work, and how much time was spent finding himself surfing the internet, right? And then you do that for every week. So it's a reality checker, because many times you find that you're subconsciously giving the excuse that, oh, I was on my phone doing something really important. But now when you break it down by what sites you were browsing, what app you were using, you're able to give yourself that reality check and realize, okay, I actually did important stuff for 2 hours out of the 35 hours. I went to an app that teaches math or chemistry, or that helps me improve on whatever course I'm doing or in my work. Spend 3 hours on exercise, and then the other 30, what did I spend them on? WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook, just finding out what is happening to the Kardashians or to the other people who left the UK, what were they named, Meghan and whoever it is. So that is a reality check. And then the second part is graphing. I like the use of graphing because it is very visual and it helps you to track. In the independent learning program that we do, we also have tracking of individual performance on a graph. It's a very good visual. So the way this graph works, if you have actually used it, is it tracks your performance in the course of the month. So in week 1, how much time did you spend doing trivia on your phone? Week 2, how many hours was it? Week 3, week 4. In other words, how am I doing? How am I getting to where I want to get? Do I want to spend less time? If I want to spend less time, what does my graph say has been happening? If my plan was to spend more time on my phone for whatever reason it is, what does my graph say is happening to the way I'm doing it? So I hope you are able to do your cumulative monthly tracker, and I'd like to hear some experiences. Any experiences? What did you find? Cybernet, you want to share? Pearl? Guys, don't be afraid. This is a self-discovery process. So we are all, we're all learning. So it's okay to share. Even if you found that you spent the whole month on your phone, it is totally fine. No one is going to judge you. Anyone wants to share with us? Brenda, Holga, Emma?
Okay, I can say something.
Brenda?
So I was able to track how much time I spent on my phone the whole month. Initially, I thought I had spent very little time. But when I finally looked at the figure, my first reaction was to throw away the phone. I was in shock because almost, on average, I spent 9 hours on the phone, and I'm wondering what? So that was a shock to me and an eye-opener. And what I'm looking forward to doing now is, as you mentioned, cut down on the time for each of the top apps by 20%. And then for this next month, see how I'm actually doing. And more importantly, where have I put that time and what are the results?
Absolutely. Brenda, thank you very much for sharing that experience, throwing away your phone. So that's really an interesting finding. And the most important thing is you've made a plan going forward. And then the next most important thing will be to actually act on the plan. So once again, when you reduce time on something that you feel you should not be doing, you need to consciously move that time to an item, preferably an item in quadrant 2. Please don't move time from your phone to distraction. So you're like, fine, I was spending so much time surfing the internet, now I will spend that time on emails. So please move the time to an item that is in quadrant 2. If you have children, for instance, or if you're a child at home, can you move, let's say you have a free hour, spend that time with your children, spend that time with your spouse, spend that time with your parents, spend that time building a relationship, spend the time doing a course, something to contribute to where you want to be 10 to 15 years from now. Thank you, Brenda, for that. Pearl, I see your hand is up.
I tried to download the app on my phone, but my phone is not compatible for that app.
Oh dear. So I'm sure there are other apps that are available online that can help you track your phone usage. I normally talk about Stay Focused because I've used it before and it worked really well for me. But you can search on the internet or in the Google Play Store or the Apple Store if you have an iPhone, and look for an app that can help you monitor your screen time. Android, actually, within each app settings is also a time management app within there. So sorry about that, Pearl. Okay, anyone else wants to share their experience with the monthly tracking?
I can share.
Yes, Paula?
Unfortunately, I also didn't get the Stay Focused app, but I've been using the screen time management on the iPhone.
Okay.
But I found that the total number of hours I spend per week hasn't changed much. What changed is the time I spent on non-beneficial things, non-beneficial activities. So for example, in the first week from 1st to 8th August, I spent 57 minutes on beneficial activities during the whole week, and then 52 hours and 52 minutes on non-beneficial activities. So after he introduced us to this cell phone management, in the next week, after he told us to cut down the amount of time we spend on non-beneficial activities, in the next week, time on beneficial activities was 6 hours, 27 minutes. And then the rest of the time on non-beneficial activities was 51 hours, 46 minutes. So it reduced from the first week, and it improved in the next week, that's week 3. Then in the last week from 24th to 31st August, I slacked a bit. I spent more time on the phone overall and less time on beneficial activities. But this week from 31st to yesterday, I spent less time on non-beneficial activities and more time on beneficial activities. So my graph has a spike at the beginning, and then it came down, and then kind of it's almost like this one on the screen. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. So one thing about time spent on the phone, there are some beneficial activities on the phone, which is amazing. But we need to look between the beneficial activities that need us to be focused on the phone, and then there are beneficial activities that don't need us to focus on the phone. What do I mean by this? For instance, if you have an exercise app, right? You are going to set it, let's say, to see how long you do exercise or how long you walk. You go for a walk, for instance, or jog. You notice that while you're using your phone for it, it is not requiring you to be on your phone. I don't know if you're seeing that. So you're using the phone to track what you're doing, but you don't have to be on the phone. There are some apps that you can use, you can call like focusing apps, where you set it and say, I'm going to, for instance, read a book or concentrate on my work for the next 30 minutes. So although the phone is doing the tracking, you're not spending time on your phone. What I'm trying to encourage us to do is spend less and less time on our phone for activities that spike what we call the dopamine receptors. So dopamine is a chemical that is related with addiction. So someone shared with us, and many of us have gone through that experience, where sometimes you pick up your phone, even if you had just picked it up a minute ago, thinking maybe I have missed some kind of communication. So you're no longer doing it consciously. Your brain is seeking to get a high from looking at your phone, just like people who smoke and people who do drugs do. You get that high from checking the phone. So phones have actually been found to create actual addiction, and people are in therapy because of phone addiction. So even with activities that are beneficial, if it involves us being focused on the phone, especially those that create a spike in our dopamine, then let's try to reduce on those. If you're reading, for instance, an ebook, that is a different thing. And the way the app that ebooks come in is different. You read them and you feel the enjoyment of reading a book, but you're not dying to be on the phone because of the book. while your relationship with, for instance, a social media site or reading news, you get to a point where your brain is dying to be there, to be on your phone, checking on the news and the like. So let's really be very careful about cell phone usage, even for beneficial things. If you find that it acquires your full-time attention on the phone and you're looking forward to doing that. So Paula, thank you very much for sharing your experience. If anyone wants to share, please, please, you're welcome to share, or any questions, anyone needs to ask a question, please ask a question now. And now, just to, one other thing. So, Emma, just a second, if you don't mind, just a second. So for young people, I encourage you very much to read books that are physical books. Why am I saying this? It's because we talked about it, those who attended our first session, we talked about the development of the brain. Your brains are undergoing a lot of development right now. So what is happening is that there's pruning going on, either use it or lose it concept. So your brain is pruning everything that is not used a lot and keeping anything that you're using a lot, whether it is good or bad, it keeps it because you're using it a lot. So if you train yourself when you're young, before the ages of 25, 26, to do things like actual reading of physical books, for instance, your brain is going to keep those pathways intact because it believes that you need them. And this is going to be very helpful for you in future. But if we are spending more time picking up the phone, that pathway in your brain is going to be maintained because the brain believes that it's important since you're doing it a lot anyway. So I encourage young people, let's, as much as possible, read physical books. Those who can afford, whose parents can afford, once again, your super tools, ask them if they can buy for you the apps which are, the devices that are specifically for reading, like the Kindle app. Myself, I actually bought myself a Kindle app so that if I'm not reading a hard book and I need to read, I read from the Kindle app. It has nothing else apart from reading in there. So I can't scroll to WhatsApp in the middle of reading something. I'm focused only on reading the book. So those who can afford it and those who have parents or whoever it is, your super tool, who can actually, you can leverage to buy this for you, please take advantage of that. Okay, Emma, I hope you've not forgotten what you wanted to share.
No, it was just to add on just to add on some of my observations around the Stay Focused app. Sorry, I have a cook that likes to say hi when I'm on the phone. So I noticed that the brain somehow the same way you said that you get used to reaching out for your phone. I was shocked that when I blocked off my mornings, I actually wasn't reaching out for it. So it's like in my head, it had been set, something had been said there that, you can't touch the phone till there. And it took even just like 1 or 2 days. And I realized I actually was not reaching out for it. So that was a very good surprise. What is really still a work in progress for me is replacing the time saved to more productive, issues and not things that spring up from here and there.
Yeah.
Because another thing that I also realized on the app, because when we started off, yes, WhatsApp was, I think, okay, I don't want to say like most people, but for me, my WhatsApp was the mostly used app. Then it dropped, even towards the end of the month, it really dropped, it's down there. But then Facebook took over. And I think probably for me, why, yeah, so you see, it's like it's just a change. And that may be because, okay, I'm not giving an excuse, but here, like at home, we don't have pay TV. So for any updates or anything, for me, I even look to that. So if it's the site, so if it's the, say like the New Vision, NTV, something breaking, not that those are the only things, you may start off that web, but then you'll end up looking at other things in a feed. Sorry about the noise in my background.
We hear you.
Yes, so I found that lack of planning is brought in new issues,
Right.
like the new things coming in, the new apps, overuse in other apps. So
Okay.
I'm yet to get a plan around those, but I'm trying to get back into reading. I used to be a very good reader. The habit dropped somewhere along the way. I don't know if it was the parenting journey that disrupted it, but I'm really trying to get back in there.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for sharing. I like how you said you begin to discover other things that are on the phone. You know what I did with myself when I started this process. If I pick up my phone and I'm going to open an app, I ask myself, why are you opening that app? For instance, if I want to go to WhatsApp, I ask myself, why are you going there? Is there a message that I have to send, or is there a message that I've actually been waiting for? And you know, what I do these days during Lent, one of the things that I fast is I fast all social media platforms. And it's amazing to find out that people actually don't miss you. You know, you're off Facebook for a whole month and no one is going to call you and say, Emma, are you okay? We've not seen you here for 1 month now. Even on WhatsApp, people are not going to, even the groups where you're very active, people are not going to call and check whether everything is okay. People just move on, you know? So it's really important to ask yourself, now that I'm opening WhatsApp, what exactly am I opening it for at this time? When you're opening the news to check, what am I going in there to check? And Emma used a term that made me smile in the middle, reactive terms. You end up, you know, you open to check breaking news and you end up, you know, that's term, you end up. So that is a reactive term. It's really interesting if we begin to listen to ourselves speak. So ask yourself, why am I opening my phone at this time? Every time you find yourself about to open, ask yourself, why? I don't know if you've noticed in the Stay Focused app, it actually tells you how many times you looked at your screen, whether you did nothing. So how many times you unlocked, but also how many times you looked at your screen. If you do it this time, you'll throw away your phone for real, like Brenda was telling us she did. Just check how many times you looked at your screen and how many times you unlocked your screen. You'll be really shocked.
I think for me, what I like is when it's blocked. The first time it happened, I was amused. Like when you block off an app and you try to touch it. Yeah, because you can imagine the early days, I would forget and still reach out for WhatsApp.
Yeah.
And the warning it gives you, stay focused, what's set on your goals. And then it's like you've already tried to touch this app, you know, to launch this app like maybe 12 times and you're like, 24 times, are you sure? So you just back off.
Yeah, so it's really interesting the things that you learn. And I actually found out that in Android, in the settings, you can set your phone in a way that at a certain time of the day or for a certain period, everything goes gray. So you see the apps, but they're no longer in color. And when you open, there's nothing in color. Everything is gray and white. And you can't believe, so when I tried to read about this, I found something interesting. The brain is stimulated by color. We like colorful things. For instance, if you see somebody wearing a bright pink dress or a bright red dress and walking next to someone in black, your eyes will automatically go to the person who is in bright pink because that is how our brains work. So this setting, it's in all Android phones. It sets all your apps and everything you do in your phone to gray and white. And you can't believe what a put off it is. So I encourage you, if it means having multiple layers of prevention, please take advantage and do it. Multiple timers, multiple ways of keeping you off the phone. So thank you very much, Emma. And you bring us to another thing, which is actually what is on the next slide, which is practical management, practical ways to improve our time management. There are about 10, but today we're just going to look at 3 because I know changing time management habits is going to be an ongoing process. And I feel that it's not helpful if I bundle you with 10 things to go and do this week. The first thing, we have talked about this since the beginning of the program, is priorities, priorities, priorities. Be clear about what is on your plate. In other words, be clear about what your priorities are. Look at your wheel of life on a regular basis. Place it in a place where you can see. Some of the people I've trained and I've coached have decided to blow it up and have big blown up versions stuck on their walls. Others have multiple wheels of life on the bedroom, in the kitchen, to remind them. Be clear about what is on your plate. Because if we don't remember what our priorities are, then the brain says, you know, there's no point focusing on what you actually don't remember. So we need to be really focused on what our priorities are. So your wheel of life and your big rocks, remember that assignment that I asked you to do. So last night I had a really interesting dream, which I thought I would share with you today, a very interesting dream. And I believe in dreams for one reason. I don't know if you have read the story of Solomon. We all remember that the Bible says Solomon was the wisest man who has ever lived. And what surprised me when I was reading the story of Solomon is that Solomon actually, you remember how it is said in the Bible that God asked him what he would want, and he chose wisdom. I found out that it happened when Solomon was asleep. It happened to him in his dream, and he gave the answers in his dream. And for me, that was really powerful. It made me believe that if we keep our minds focused on our priorities, even in our sleep, we actually hear things about what we should be doing. So last night, because I've been praying for God to give me directions as we go through this program, like I said, this is the first time that we are doing it online, so I need guidance on how to do it online. And last night I had a dream, and let me share it with you. And these are the words that I had in the dream. If you had to do one thing in your life, knowing that God would make you succeed in it, what would it be? And I want everyone to ask themselves this question. If you had to do just one thing in your lifetime, if you're going to live to be 70, 80, or whatever, if you had to do just one thing in your lifetime, and God would definitely make you succeed, what would that thing be? I'm going to ask you to take this question and to ponder over it this week. For some of you, the answer is immediate. For me, it was immediate. I didn't even have to think. My answer was immediate. I won't share it with you because it may bias you in deciding what it is that you want to do. We are all different. Our priorities are different. So if you had just one thing to do, and this thing is going to be your biggest rock, if you had one thing to do in your life, that one thing God says, I am definitely going to make you succeed at doing it, what would that one thing be? And you know, just after I gave my answer, all this was happening in my sleep, one of my fears came out, and the fear was related to that priority, the fear of dying before I complete the priority. And guess what I had in my mind being said? Do not care about this. And when I was thinking about it during my quiet time this morning, I realized that the fear of dying is in my circle of, who knows? Circle of? In which circle is the fear of dying?
Circle of concern.
Circle of concern. You can't do anything about that. You can live a healthier life. You can, whatever it is, in order to reduce your risk of dying prematurely. But at the end of the day, like someone said, two things are certain in life, taxes and death. We are all going to die at some point, and there's no point worrying about it today. Do what you can do to keep healthy, avoid taking unnecessary risks. The other time, unfortunately, people drowned in the River Nile a week ago. A family drowned there. There are some risks that are not worth taking. So those are things that you can do. They're in your area of control and influence. But as far as the eventual dying, we are all going to die someday. So please put it in your area of concern. So that is what came into my mind immediately. All this happened in my sleep, by the way, but it was really a powerful experience for me, and I contemplated over it during my quiet time this morning. So that is your homework. If you had to do just one thing in your life that is definite that you're going to succeed at, what is that one thing going to be? Not to one thing, just one thing. And then after doing that, ask yourself, where am I today in terms of my pizza from the scale of 0 to 10? Where am I in achieving that goal, that one thing that I know that I will definitely succeed at? So once again, just one thing in your life, if you were sure that you would succeed at it, what would it be? The next is create a schedule. We need to have a schedule, because if you don't have a schedule, everything else is going to become more important. The trivias, the distractions, they're all going to come and take up the places. Someone was telling us how she finds it hard to say no. And it's hard to say no when you don't have a schedule. You know, if you like walking around with money, you always have, so sorry for students who are still young, your parents may be giving you 5K, but these days parents give 100,000. So let's say you always have 50,000 shillings in your handbag or in your pocket. When people ask you, someone asks you to lend them 5,000, it is harder to say no than if you didn't have the money. If you don't have money, you're like, you know what, I actually don't have money. I don't have any money to lend you. But if you have money in your pocket, you're more likely going to lend it out. And so if you're going to have money in your pocket, make sure that the money is budgeted. If you have 100,000 shillings in your pocket and it is not budgeted, you're going to lend it out even to people you know don't really need that money. You're going to go to a supermarket and come out with all sorts of things. You go for a tube of toothpaste and come up with a loaf of bread, a packet of sausages, and I don't know what else, simply because that money has not been scheduled. Budgeting is scheduling in financial terms. Remember, in the beginning of this program, we said each of us human beings is a company. And a company without a budget is sure to die within 1 year. You've heard how in Uganda most businesses last for. What have you heard? How long do most businesses, new businesses in Uganda last? Who knows that statistic? New businesses in Uganda, what is the average lifespan? Anyone knows?
They don't get to celebrate their first year.
Exactly.
That's right.
Excellent. That's absolutely right. Most businesses in Uganda do not celebrate their first birthday. So every business that has been launched today, which is the 5th of September, if next year on the 5th of September, you look for the people who launched those businesses, majority of them will already be dead because they don't have a schedule, they don't have a budget. So you need to schedule your time. All these lovely things we've talked about over the last 1 month that we are still talking about today, we'll talk about next week, are all going to die. They're going to die very quickly if you don't have a schedule, if you don't budget your time. Remember, time is money, time is a currency. If you don't budget your time, all these good ideas are going to die away. The internet is becoming more exciting. I mean, there's so much you can find on the internet now. YouTube, amazing, lots of things there. There's, new things come up. TikTok, that is the thing that a lot of young people are on. Instagram, they tell me, saw yesterday, exciting things are coming up that are going to disrupt our lives and interrupt our lives. If you don't have a schedule, if your time is not scheduled, then you're more likely to fall for these things. But if you know that this week I have to do A, B, C, and D, these are my priorities. I have to be at this point as far as this goal is concerned. Then when the new app comes up, you're not going to go onto that app because you know that you have a budget. Your time is budgeted for. You're not going to be giving, those of us who have people who are getting married in our lives, you go for wedding meetings, and if your money of that month is not budgeted, Jesus forbid, you'll be the one who is pledging 150,000, 300,000, giving the chairman's bag 50,000 shillings because your money is not budgeted. So it's the same with time. I can't emphasize this enough. Please budget your time. What are your priorities and budget it? All of us who have done our cell phone tracking, I want to believe that nobody, when they were looking at their cell phone tracking, would have told me that, at the beginning of this month, I budgeted that I was going to spend 10 hours on social media. None of us did that. But the fact is that because our time is not budgeted in detail, we have a lot of loose time to spend. You know how Uganda said, you have a loose 10K. If you have a loose 1 hour, it's going to go to social media. A loose 1 hour, it's going to be spent watching series. So let's not have the loose time around us. Budget your time. And we're going to stop today on setting. So before I go to setting deadlines, any questions? Anyone wants to say something? I've talked about priorities and creating a schedule, budgeting our time. Does anyone have something they want to share before I move on?
Yes, I have a question. So
Yes.
how do we deal with having self-control? Because we may be self-aware and we know we're not supposed to be spending too much time on distractions, but how do we, develop that self-control and self-discipline?
Does anyone want to chip in? What do you think? Anyone who wants to share their experience with us? Yes, Holger?
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, just like you're saying about creating a schedule, when you have a schedule, everything of yours will be planned, and eventually it will help you to avoid those wasted time you'd have used for some of those other things which are not priorities in your program.
Okay. So Holger is really spot on. If you think back about the everything we have discussed from the beginning, from when we started, I didn't start with time management, and that was intentional. We started off by identifying what the priorities in our lives are. You know, if you don't know what your priorities are, even when you're creating a schedule, the schedule is going to be helter-skelter. It's going to be all over the place. But when you know what your priorities are, and when you're creating this schedule in this coming week, look at your priorities, your will of life, and create a schedule keeping that in mind. So the first thing is, what are your priorities? If you know your priorities, then it is going to be easy to create a schedule. Now, when you have created a schedule, then you're going to go back to your SWOT analysis. Remember, this is a strategic planning session. You're going to go to your strengths, which are your superpowers, your super tools, your threats and your weaknesses. And you're going to say, now I have a schedule. What strength do I have to be able to do the things that are on my schedule? What opportunities can I take advantage of? What are my weaknesses? If my weakness is procrastination, how am I going to change that so that I can meet what is on my schedule? If I have a threat, there's something that is threatening, like this boss who keeps giving you last minute assignments. How am I going to deal with that so that I keep my schedule intact? It's really important to think in terms of time, in terms of money, because money is, for us human beings, I think after God, it's like money. And for many people, actually, money is placed before God. So it's really important to think of time as you would think of money. People budget money critically. My grandmom was illiterate. She didn't know how to read, but she knew how to count money. So I asked her, but how come you can count money? She said, who can be there when they don't know how to count money? So if you think of your time in terms of money, then it's going to be easy to budget for it. You'll know what are the important things. Those who are parents, you know that school fees is up there. So if you're looking at your own time, you're looking at your priorities, your will of life, you know what is going to be up there, what is going to be in the middle, and what are the things that are going to be at the bottom. So please always think about time as you would think about money. As you're creating a budget, your schedule, think about it as you would do when you're creating a budget. And remember, a budget is a plan, is a plan. It is actually not it's not the actuals. People in finance, they talk about the budget and then the actuals. So create a schedule, that is your budget, and then you're going to have to do monitoring and evaluation. It will be weekly, and then I encourage you to have your big date for a quarterly evaluation, and then annual evaluations as well. So you're going to look at how you perform. So this is your budget, your schedule, and then these are your actuals. I budgeted to spend at least 2 hours a day studying. At the end of the day, I spent 3 hours studying, or I spent 1 hour studying. So you're looking at the budgeted and the actuals. The only way you can do an evaluation is if you had a schedule, if you had a budget before. So this week, you're going to spend time creating a schedule. Let's start off with a schedule for the next. Those who can manage a schedule for the next 1 month, please do that. Those who can manage a schedule for 1 week, if you've never done it before, it could be a good point to start with 1 week. And then those who pros at this, you can even now plan for your 1 year. Number 3 is set up deadlines. When there are deadlines, I think it was Emma who shared with us how the boss suddenly tells you, you have to get this work done by tomorrow, 11 o'clock. Because Emma has had the deadline, that deadline is going to keep flashing in her mind. 11 o'clock, I have to get this done. Subconsciously, she's going to be created a countdown timer. And every time she looks at her clock, the brain works out, how much time do I have till 11 o'clock? And I assure you, by 11 o'clock, Emma will have this work done. Now, the problem we have with items that are in quadrant 2, remember when we were reading them, we even feel, we leaned back on our chairs, we were all so chill. They are important, but they are not urgent. And because they are not urgent, you know that if you have not spent any time studying math, for students, people who are students, you've not spent any time reading your books this week, next week nothing is going to happen to you because anyway it is COVID, we are on this extended holiday, right? So it is important, but it is not urgent. So it's going to be upon each of ourselves, on yourself, to create deadlines. Say, I'm going to do some studying, or I'm going to spend time with my parents, I'm going to spend time with my siblings, with my children. I'm going to start working on this skill that I need to develop. And by Saturday next week, I need to have reached this level, or I need to have spent this amount of time doing A, B, and C. Set deadlines and hold yourself to those deadlines. Let's remember things that are in quadrant 2 are important, but don't allow them to move from being important to becoming urgent. How can you do that? It's by being proactive, acting upon them, and setting deadlines and holding yourself to those deadlines. I encourage the use of people around you. Sometimes if you find that you're not being true to yourself, get an accountability partner and tell them, you know, I tell Brenda, by next week, I need to have completed this assignment that I've been working on that is taking forever. Please remind me, please check on me next week on Friday because my deadline is Friday. Now, because Brenda knows that you need to have finished by Friday, your mind is telling you that you'll be embarrassed if on Friday next week, you tell Brenda that the work is not yet done. So if you need to get an accountability partner, someone who will put you to task, and you'll be embarrassed to talk to if you have actually not done what you wanted to do. There is something I run called 300 in 1 week. This is for people who want to be writers, who are writing books or writing whatever. So what we do is we remind each other every week to write at least 300 words on the project that we are working on. And this really works. For instance, one of the books that I have written is actually, they're now doing the layout. They started working on the layout for publication this week. So it is really doable. Set a timeline, set a deadline, and you can actually work on it. So in other words, I'm calling those who want to be writers, get in touch with me, and in the next session of 300 in 1 week, you can be involved and you write that book that you've always wanted to write. So that is something I'm throwing out there. So I've told you this is your homework. Please do the homework. For your sake, please do the homework. And for mine too, if I change one person out there, it makes a world of a difference for me. Okay, so this is the last one. Remember this, we finished the month of August. Next week, we are going to go in details of how to do a monitoring and evaluation. In other words, how to compare your schedule to your actuals, your budget to your actuals. We will have a session on that next week. But please begin to think about your month. How has the month gone? And please write down. When you write down, it is powerful because you've actually seen it. There's something that it does to your mind. And also for posterity, in future, you want to look back and see where you started and where you are. And it will help you see if you are on the right track or if you need to work harder or there are things that you need to change. I believe that was the last slide. Continue personal cell phone tracking. We've talked about that. We've started a new month, so we go back to daily tracking, and then we shall do the end of month tracking. If you think you have mastered your daily use, it's okay. You can stop the cell phone tracking, but do the weekly cumulative tracking. But if you're still spending 30 hours on your phone, 20 hours on your phone in a week, I think it is important that you do the daily tracking. We've talked about this, reducing. So for every time that you salvage, make sure that you intentionally place it onto another beneficial activity. So that's all I had prepared for you today. I thought it would take exactly 1 hour, but it has gone over 1 hour. I hope it wasn't too much information in one go. Please share if you have anything any question that you have or any input that you want to give to the rest of us. The floor is open. Just unmute yourself and speak.
Hi, mine is more like a question on the wheel of life.
Yes.
When you mentioned some of the people that you've done this with who are able to put up charts and everything, is it possible to say that maybe in a week I'm going to focus on these ones, some of these aspects out of my wheel of life, because, or the expectation is for to be able to squeeze them all somehow within that week?
Okay, that's a good question. Does anyone want to share what they've been doing in relation to what Emma has asked? Anyone? Okay, so if no one is sharing, I'll let you know what I think. So for the beginning, and I think I mentioned this last week, because we are doing this program that is time bound, we are going to be done next week, hopefully. What I would ask all of you to do is try to give something, to give time to everything on your wheel of life every week. The reason for this is because we are trying to develop a new habit. New habits are hard to develop, and habits only develop through repetition. We need to keep repeating something over and over. However, as you go along, remember you drew your wheel of life and you know what your pizza looks like. You'll find that there are areas where you're doing so well, you're maybe around already 8 or 9. The trick with this is that it's going to go back to human character. There are things that are easier, and so we spend more time doing things that are easier. Think of yourself, remember when you were a student, and there are people here who are students. You find that you spend more time reading subjects that are easy, the ones that you like. You spend more time reading them, and so you keep doing better in those subjects. And the ones that you don't like, you leave them for last minute, and as a result, your performance keeps remaining bad in those subjects. So it's the same way with the wheel of life. There are things that are easier to do, and you find that you're gravitating towards that, or things that because of some external factor, you're doing more. Paula gave us the example, she's doing an internship, which is good. Paula and Moses are both doing internships, which are good for their personal growth. There are people doing courses. You'll find that you're spending more time in those areas because there's an external deadline that has been set on you. And then everything else, you're leaving everything else because there's no deadline. And that's why I'm saying it's important that you have a schedule for everything. So for a beginning, just to try out your muscles, give everything some time during the week. But as you go forward, things like, for instance, finances, saving, you can make that weekly activity or monthly activity. However, you can spend time on finances, reading about how to manage personal finances. That is actually time that you have given to your finances. So in summary, as we build a habit, let's make sure we do it as frequently as possible. But once you've mastered it, then you can begin to spread out. However, within every week, make sure you have done something towards every item on your priority list. And in that thing, that one thing that you want to do, if you knew that God would make sure that you succeed at it, that one thing, you have to do something about it, if possible, every day or every other day. I hope that answers your question, Emma.
Yes, it does. But then there's just one thing, I need to be honest. I don't know if there's anyone out there like me or it's just me. Either way, it's still okay. I find, honestly, there are some items, okay, maybe one or two, but mostly one that, yes, I think I'm still being really reactive to, and I'm dragging my feet of, I think sometime in one of the previous sessions, someone said, there's one of those things where you feel like you've been proactively, maybe an area you've taken steps and you've done things and there's not been much progress. So it's been discouraging. It's to start to do this all over again. So in my mind, for me, it's like, not again. What else can I do? I've switched off. I honestly don't want to. So when I even hear that, I have to do something about it, I'm like, no. It's like I'm turning a blind eye, looking away from it.
Okay. So
everything
Emma,
but that.
So Emma, thank you very much for being open with that. So the thing is, if that thing made it onto your priority list, then it is actually something that needs your attention. Your brain is telling you there is an open loop. It has to be closed, which means you need to do something about it. It is similar to the analogy of the student who hates physics so much, but they know it has to be examined on, and they're like, you know what, I will read it whenever. And so because they read it at the last minute, they end up failing. So you end up going into a vicious cycle. So if something has managed to sneak itself onto your wheel of life, that means it is one of the priorities of your life. And if you're finding so much resistance to implementing action in that area, then it's all the more reason for you to sit down and come up with alternatives. This is an area where you're going to need to do a root cause analysis. What is the problem? Why is it a problem? Why is that problem? So you keep going down and down until you get to a point where you have control. And that is where your implementation begins. So once again, whatever has managed to sneak itself onto your wheel of life, remember when you were doing it, I said your gut feeling will tell you. And so Emma, which means you did it right. You used your gut feeling because your brain was telling you it's priority. You didn't rationalize it. So it is on your priority list.